Do you want to eat healthy for the holidays but can't imagine giving up your favorite dishes? I get it. I've been there. And over the years, I've figured out how to hack my favorite recipes and turn them into delicious, healthy options for my Thanksgiving feast. Today, I'm giving a quick overview on how to hack your recipes and swap out what I call the bad boys and introduce those more gut and healthy friendly swaps. Make sure you're subscribed for all the videos in this Thanksgiving Healthy Holiday series and grab my guide over at lowertoxiclife.com for grocery lists, recipes, and more. And also, if you have a specific recipe you want hacked, send me an email at jackie@lowertoxiclife.com. Send me the ingredients and the recipe, and I'll hack that for you and share it maybe on a video. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a purist. I'm an 80-20 girl, and I'm giving you some tips to time your food and the way that you eat it in a way that's going to lower your glucose and insulin release. So when we hack those recipes and we set them up with ingredients that help our body do all of this, it's much simpler. So we're going to talk a little bit about how it's processed and how it's stored in your body. Now, I've talked before about cloaking your carbs, and that's a way of eating healthy fat, healthy protein, and slow carbs and fiber before you eat sugar, highly processed carbohydrates, or any type of ultra-processed foods. This will dramatically lower the glucose spike in your body, and I'll share more about that process at the end for those who are interested. All right, so breaking down the main components of my traditional Thanksgiving meal, which is shown here on the slide, this is exactly what I'm serving. Turkey. Your turkey's fine, right? Turkey is a quality protein. It's something that your body easily assimilates, and it definitely slows down any glycemic response in the body. Mashed potatoes, especially if you cook those the day before, refrigerate them, and then reheat and mash them, this will lower the glycemic index by 30 to 40%. And then when you top that with my gluten-free gravy options, you're in truly good shape with that part of your recipe. Dressing. Now, I'm sharing my wild rice and sausage dressing recipe. This recipe has a low GI or glycemic index. And again, it's made with wild rice. Now, you could substitute the wild rice for a gluten-free bread. I like to make a bread with cassava or teff flour, sausage, nuts, and healthy oils for the fats. And again, this is a great way to serve your body nutritionally well by still enjoying the delicious components of that Thanksgiving meal. Now, I'm serving green beans with a very high quality pasture-raised bacon. Again, this is a slow carb, healthy fat. It's a great dish. My chopped salad with honey mustard, slow carbs, nuts, and then that balsamic dressing, which is oil, a healthy fat, and vinegar, which we've talked before about how vinegar assimilates into your body and lowers that glycemic index. And then my pumpkin curry soup, it's everything healthy. It's a fabulous recipe and is gluten-free, and I make it dairy-free, which I'll be showing you. Now, a big thing I want to note in this whole process, eating in this way with lower glycemic flours and alternative sugars and alternative dairy, this is not a get out of jail free card by any means. And what I mean by that is getting rid of highly refined white flour, sugar, and regular dairy means that you're doing better for your body, but it doesn't mean that you can just eat as much as you want whenever you want. So, like anything, pay attention, eat mindfully, take a few preventative measures before you begin to eat. So here are some specific food ingredients to pay attention to, and I'll be sharing swap outs on wheat and gluten, sugar, and dairy. Starting with wheat, I personally prefer nut flours. Almond and coconut flours are two that I constantly have as a staple. They're always in my pantry, and I use those to cook the majority of the things that I make that use a flour. Now there is teff, T-E-F-F flour, cassava that I've already mentioned, tapioca flour, Bob's Red Mill gluten-free alternative flours. There's a whole variety of those. He has a sweet sweet white sorghum flour that's great for baking. He has a gluten-free all-purpose baking flour, and then a 1-to-1 gluten-free baking flour. So the biggest thing to pay attention with these is that when you're baking light, fluffy pastries, a pie crust, or I'm trying to think what else I use them for. I have an eggnog rum cake that I use these for. Bob's all-purpose or 1-to-1 flour is absolutely phenomenal for that. I mentioned my eggnog rum cake. That is a classic example. It's a recipe that's been in my holiday menu for a couple of decades, and I hated to give that up when I gave up gluten flour. And so over the course of a few years with testing and trying out different alternatives, I found the perfect flour combination for that. Now, for making gravy, tapioca flour has become my absolute favorite. It's super easy to work with. It's light and fluffy, and you don't need a whole lot of it. So again, it's a lower glycemic index flour. It's not perfect. It's not giving you the green light to just eat as much as you want, but it's still a better alternative to white refined flour. Now, teff, I mentioned that. Teff flour comes from somewhere in Africa, and it makes a really nice tortilla pita type bread that, again, is easy to make, easy to store. And that's another one that could be great in your stuffing, or certainly as almost like a flatbread or something along those lines. Everything else that I make, I use my almond and coconut flours most specifically. Now, my rosemary, flaxseed, almond flour crackers that I'm using for my menu this year is made from that. I also take that same exact crust and make it into a shortbread or a flatbread that I can do almost anything with that would be traditional flatbread type of food, and it's fantastic. I also use my almond and coconut flour for my paleo muffins. Again, anything that's muffin-like that doesn't require that super light pastry style flour. Now, back to cloaking your carbs and eating in a timed, orderly way to protect your metabolic health. This is so important to keep in mind. And I'm going to share a little bit of that as I go through the next category, which are sugars and alternative sugar. So I typically work with coconut sugar, monk fruit, erythritol, not always the easiest to say, stevia, and then swerve, which is a convection sugar, takes the place of powdered sugar. There are also dates and dried fruits, 85% cacao, dark chocolate, and fruits and nuts. There are a lot of different things that you can use in this way to kind of substitute for sugar and getting that sweet tooth. Now, as far as dairy goes, I don't use a whole lot of traditional dairy. I typically lean now toward goat and sheep. So I'll eat goat cheese, feta cheese, and then I like to use a goat yogurt, which you'll see in my smashed potatoes recipe. I'll use a grass-fed butter. A lot of times I'll make that into my own ghee, Ghee. You can buy ghee, but you can actually make it very easily too, and it's much more affordable and simple to make. You don't need a whole lot of extra skills or anything to make that. So for dairy, I substitute goat yogurt, goat and sheep's feta cheese. And then I use a lot of coconut alternatives too. I will buy the Trader Joe's, that's the specific brand I like to use, the full fat coconut cream, and then coconut milk. And then I will use that for doing a lot of different things, including mashing potatoes, making gravy, and making some of the other dessert recipes that you will see. Now, again, I'm not a purist. I'm just giving you some ideas of some different hacks that you can use. I'll be breaking down each one of these categories into its own video. So again, make sure you're subscribed so that you get that entire series on healthy holiday Thanksgiving food and those food swaps. All right, so here's my brief science on cloaking your carbs. And this basically came from the book, The Glucose Revolution by the Glucose Goddess. And you can go to citations.lowertoxiclife.com. I have a little visitor here who wants to make her appearance in my video. This is Luna. So anytime you place a piece of food, let's say bread, in your mouth, your taste buds and the enzymes in your saliva begin turning those carbohydrates into glucose. which is essentially a type of sugar. This glucose and food enters your bloodstream, causing blood sugar levels to rise. This rise in blood sugar signals your pancreas to release insulin. And insulin is a hormone that helps your cells absorb glucose. I'm rubbing the cat here. It helps your cells absorb that glucose from the blood to use for energy. And that effectively lowers your blood sugar level. So you get that spike, everything, the hormones, all the stuff that your body knows to do goes to work and it lowers that. But when we overeat sugar, we overeat ultra processed foods and those high glycemic foods, and especially on an empty stomach, your body has to store it somewhere. And it's like packing a suitcase. It will often store it away in muscles and ultimately build that into fat stores. Now, this is why fasting can be so effective. And make sure you go to my playlist and watch my series on fasting, because fasting can be an effective way, because when your body is in a fasted state and no food is coming in, it will basically call on those stores. It will begin to unpack that suitcase and burn that for fuel when that food isn't coming in. So we want to avoid that steady secretion of insulin release during the day. And that's when we constantly eat all day, we snack all day. Then we eat at meal times. It gives us a large burst of insulin. And then one of the best things that you can do for your body is allow at least 12 hours between the last piece of food or beverage you put in your mouth at night before you go to bed to the next morning, that first piece of food or beverage. All right, so just a reminder on carb cloaking in terms of the menu that I have here for Thanksgiving. My desserts, we'll start with those because those are probably the highest glycemic release and index that you're going to see. My chocolate-covered fruits and nuts, that's a healthy fat, fiber, and then a lower amount of sugar in the dark chocolate that I use. I use an 85% cacao blend. And then my bacon wrapped cheese dates, one of my favorites. Again, the cheese, I use a goat cheese typically. It's a healthy organic fat. The bacon, I use a healthy, no antibiotics, good quality bacon. That's a healthy fat and a protein. And then it's wrapped around those dates, which are the highest glycemic in that process. But because the other things are cloaking it, the bacon and the cheese cloak the dates, and it makes it a lower glycemic index as it enters the body. And then, of course, as I mentioned, your main course, turkey, potatoes, gravy, a quality stuffing, a good slow carb like green beans or roasted asparagus or roasted Brussels sprouts, something along those lines. All of that is just fine. Just remember to eat mindfully, eat slowly, and don't overdo it. So again, make sure you're subscribed. Grab my guide at lowertoxiclife.com for all my recipes, grocery lists, and more. And make sure you watch my video on my entire Thanksgiving menu.